Welcome to the online lectures for information security. In the previous classes, we have studied what is risk identification, how you're going to assess the risks. The next one is risk control. Now, within the previous two topics that we have studied, we have identified how the organizations are determining what the risk they are going to face, what are the different risks they have identified. They have also assessed the risk. Assessment is done. Now, when you know what risks might occur, you know how much damage it can do, what are the different disadvantages, you know. So the need to implement control comes in place. Now, this control is going to implement so that you can reduce the impact of risk. So within this risk control, we are going to study the different risk control strategies. Now, once you know what are the different risks, you know what, now when you know the risk, with that particular risk is, you know how a threat can exploit a vulnerability, right? So once you're going to rank all the vulnerabilities, once ranked vulnerability risk worksheet is complete, that is when you know all the different vulnerabilities, you are going to prioritize the one that needs utmost attention at the beginning, that are the assets that are very valuable and they require protection. So by making sure that these vulnerabilities based upon their ranking, that which requires more priority at that particular time, you're going to select any of these four strategies that you're going to implement. The first one is applying safeguards, that is also your avoidance. Then transfer the risk, that is transference. Reduce the impact, mitigation. And understand the consequences and accept the risk is acceptance. So you need to remember this: force, avoidance, transference, mitigation, and acceptance. These are the four risk control strategies. We're going to begin with the first one, that is avoidance. Now, avoidance in general terms, you're trying to avoid. You're like, if suppose someone's throwing a ball at you, you're going to try and dodge the ball. So the avoidance is attempt to prevent exploitation of the vulnerability. How you're going to prevent this exploitation of the vulnerability. Now, this avoidance, this is one of a preferred approach. You're going to try and avoid the risk. It's like you're better be safe than sorry. You're going to try and eliminate the risk. You're going to try and avoid that risk. Now, this avoidance, it is going to try to attempt to prevent this exploitation of the vulnerability, and it is a preferred approach. Now, within this, there are a few tasks that you're going to do so that you're going to prevent the exploitation of that vulnerability. Let's see what are those. Now, this avoidance is accomplished by first is countering threats. How are you going to counter the different threats? Then second one is remove vulnerabilities. Now, what are vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities are weaknesses within your program. So you're going to try and remove those vulnerabilities by making fix of those vulnerabilities. Then the third one is, now this you're going to remove the vulnerabilities in all the assets. What are assets? Assets can be information, it can be data, it can be intellectual properties. Then you can also use this limit going to limit the access to assets. That is, the people that need that particular assets to work on, those people are only going to have access to those assets. The others are not going to have those assets. This can also be called as your safeguards, adding the safeguard. Now, these are the ways through which avoidance can be accomplished. You're either going to counter the threats, you can remove the vulnerabilities by making fix of the bugs, or giving some controls who can access the information and who cannot access that particular information. Now, within this, the most common method of avoiding the areas of the control, this can be implemented by either implementing a policy or providing training and education of those policies and making use of different technology. So these are the three ways in which you can avoid. So the first one, policy. Now, what actually is a policy? The first one is policy. Now, what is a policy? Now, policy is going to tell you what are the mandatory procedures that need to be followed. These are your policies. Then the second one that I told was training and education. Now, within this training and education, now when you have specific policies in place, you need to train your employees that these are the policies. This is how you're going to follow. Now, you can all, if suppose there is a new policy or you're having a new technology, based upon that technology, you need to make your employees aware of that technology. Based on that, you're going to train and you're going to educate them about the essentials of that specific policy. Then the third one is the application of technology. Now, application of technology is, now we're living in a world that is governed by technologies. Every time you have got a new technology in place. So how you're going to implement those technologies, the different technical solutions are used here so that you can avoid the risk. You're going to use our different technical solutions to reduce the risk. So the three common methods of risk avoidance we have studied, and we've studied what is application of policy, education, and applying that specific technology. Coming on to the next one, that is called as transference. Now, what is transference? You're going to shift the access from one place to another. That is transference. So within this transference approach, what you're going to do is you're going to identify a specific asset. Suppose the asset one, asset two assets are there. One is important, one is not important. So what you're going to do, if there is, suppose there is an asset that is not important and an asset that is very important, you're going to try and avoid the route of the attack to the, from the important asset to the non-important asset, because this, if suppose this is the very important asset, so this is going to have very confidential information, and compromising this information is not the risk that the company wants to take. So you're going to try and deviate the attack to some other place rather from this important one. So this is a control approach that attempts to shift the risk to other asset, other procedure, or organization. So this is how you're going to shift the risk from an important one to a non-important one. Now, if lacking, organization should hire individuals, firms that provide security management and administration expertise. Your company is going to have different employees, you're going to have different teams. You can also make use of, you can also hire other people to do this transference job. This is called as your outsourcing. Outsourcing is you're going going to give, and another, you're completely hiring another company that is not part of your company. You're hiring other people to protect your company. That is outsourcing. Then the next one is organization may then transfer risk associated with management of complex system to another organization experience in dealing with those risks. Now this is if a company does not have a people that can are so much capable to transfer the risk, you're going to hire this other people, other organizations, so that they can deal with those risks. Or you can also train some people and make a team within your own company also. It is safe to make a team within your own company, and many companies go for this approach. And the next one is mitigation. Now mitigation is removal or reducing the impact. So mitigation is it attempts to reduce the impact of vulnerability exploitation through planning and preparation. You're reducing the risk, that is called as mitigation. And how is this done? This mitigation can be done by making use of three types of plans: the incident response pros, the disaster recovery plan, and the business continuity plan. There are three types of approaches. Now let's see what these three types are. Now the the incident response plan, the action an organization can and perhaps should take while incidents is in progress. That is what you're going to do if so and so happens. Now if we take an example, if suppose there is a virus or a worm outbreak, that is many computers are infected by virus or worm. So within this, you're going to make an IR plan, that is an incident response plan. In this incident response plan, this is used to assess the likelihood of damage. That is how much damage can this virus and worm do on a particular asset. Now, this is done by the different communities of interest, that is the IT department, the financial departments, what are the different organizations, the communities of interest, how this damage is going to affect different people. Now, this is your IR plan. Now, this IR plan provides answer to questions victim poses. That is, what do I do now? That is, if a system is infected by virus and worm, what you're going to do, how you're going to do. All of this are going to be there within the incident response plan. The next one is the disaster recovery plan, the DRP. Now, this disaster recovery plan, this is one of the most common mitigation process. This DRP is the most commonly used. Now, the action to take while incident is in progress is defined in IRP. That is, within this previous one, we've seen what happens if a virus or worm attack is there, what you're going to do, whom you're going to contact, what is the likelihood of attack. This all we have identified within IRP. Whereas within this DRP, you're going to identify what you're going to do for this recovery from this disaster. Within this, the BCP encompasses the continuation of business activity. That is the next plan that within the disaster recovery plan, you're going to make use of the BCP, how you're going to make the business continuation plan if a catastrophic event occurs. Now, what is a catastrophic event? It can be a flood, it can be earthquake, anything like that. So these two are like connected to each other. Now, and the BCP, it is the most strategic and a long term of all these plans, because this requires more amount of work, making different backups. This encompasses of different business activities in a catastrophic event. This can be, as I told, it can be fires, floods, earthquakes, or different natural disaster. Now, what can this catastrophic event cause? These catastrophic events, they can cause loss of entire database. So when there is a loss of entire database, what you're going to do, you're going to make a different operational center. That is, you can have your different you can either try to work from a different location, or you can also try and have backup at a different location. That is, if suppose your stored on one. If you have an organization at one area, you're going to have a backup of all the data at another area, at an area 2. So this is what happens within a business continuity plan. Now there is a summary of all the 3 plans. Now we have studied the description. The examples are within IRP, list of steps to be taken during disaster. What you're going to do within a disaster. If suppose there is a flood, you're going to try and shut down your servers so that there is no more damage, or there is a lot of wind, so that you can avoid. Then the next one is intelligence gathering the intelligence, that is what is going to happen, how you're going, what are the different data, something that you can make a note of. Information analysis, that is the different information that are there, what you need to back up, that are necessary. Then comes the disaster recovery plan, the procedure for the recovery of lost data, that is your backup. Then procedure for re-establishment of lost services. Now within this firefight, there are different services that are lost. Suppose a server is down, a server is broken, how you're going to re-establish that server. Then the shutdown procedures to protect system and the data, as there might be a catastrophic event, so you're going to try and shut down your servers so that at least the backup can be done. Then within this BCP plan, you're going to have preparation steps for activation of secondary data centers. That are your, how you're going to activate these backup centers, how you're going to back up these files. Then establishment of a hot site in a remote location. So these are your examples. Now the time frame for the IRP is immediate and real-time reaction is there. In DRP, you've got a short-term recovery, and business continuity plan, it is a long-term operation and it requires a lot of time. And then the next one is acceptance. Now what is this acceptance? Doing nothing to protect a vulnerability and accepting the outcome of its exploitation. That is, suppose an attack is being launched on a specific asset. You're not going to make any counter attack, you're not going to try and transfer the attack, or you're not going to mitigate the attack. That is called as your acceptance. Now why are you going to do this acceptance? This acceptance is done so that if you know that this specific asset has got some information now, but when you're trying to implement some controls on it, it is increasing your cost, so you just leave it. If anyone wants to attack, let that be, and you're going to just avoid it, because the amount of work that will be done, or the amount of resources that will be required to back up this data will be less than the cost that is requiring for implementing these controls. That is your acceptance. Now, this is valid only when particular functions, service information, or assets do not justify the cost of protection. As I told, this was the second point, when the cost of protection is higher than the cost that is used to back up. Now, the term in acceptance that is used is called as your risk appetite. Now, this risk appetite, it describes the degree to which organization is willing to accept the risk. That is, to this degree, if suppose this information, it is just like 1 to 2% valuable to you, or not even that, it is 0.51%, so you are able to accept 2% of risk. That is your risk appetite, and this is taken as trade-off of the expense of applying controls. Again, this second point. Now the only acceptance strategy is valid when you have determined the level of risk. That is, if this asset is attacked, what is the possibility of risk, how much damage it is going to make, that is identified. Then second, you have assessed the probability of attack. Now, assessing the probability of attack is if suppose there's some specific asset, there are more chances that this asset is going to be attacked. So you're going to try and save less important data onto that particular server. So that is the second point. Then the third one is you have estimated the potential damage, how much damage it is going to make. You have assessed and it is less, so you're going to try and accept the risk. Estimate the potential damage from these attacks. Then the next one is you have performed a cost benefit analysis. That is CBA. We're going to study this in detail. Now, cost benefit analysis, as I told, it is like the amount of cost, the amount of money that is used to implement that protection is going to be way less than making a backup of those files or trying to again re-establish that particular assets. You have also evaluated the controls that you're going to apply and that are going to cost you more. And one more is that the sixth one is you have decided that a specific service, function, or information, or you can say, or an asset, it did not justify the cost of protection. Now, this point means that the information that is there within a particular asset, that is less valuable. As the information is less valuable, the amount of money that you want to put in, it does not justify the value of that particular information. That is why at this particular instance, you try and accept that particular attack. In these cases, you go for acceptance. With this, you've completed the risk control strategies. By the next class, we'll be studying how you're going to select a risk control strategy. Thank you.